tomorrow at 10 o'clock. You can RSVP. There is for the Brownsburg and Avon Scrapbook, Cards, and Paper Crafts Meetup, an October workshop, which is going to be on Sunday at 8 o'clock, or Sunday the 8th at 12 p.m. Or, more to our purposes here, the Marian Bible Study, hosted by the Marian Church of Christ, has a meetup entitled Read the Book of Acts, and it is tomorrow at 7 p.m. There's all kinds of events that people host on Meetup, but churches have been using it very effectively to try to reach people who would not normally walk through their church building doors. Everyone can know when your church meeting times are, but there are people in the community who are terrified about walking through they want to know the Bible. Meetup is a great way to reach those. And it can build a bridge then between those in your community and those in your congregation. So that's how we have been using it. There have been churches from Atlanta to St. Louis to San Diego and here in Indiana who are using Meetup to host Bible studies to varying levels of success. I will tell you that at Brownsburg, we have experienced extraordinary levels of success with this Meetup. We have reached, within the last year, I would say about 35 people who would not have otherwise walked through our doors. And if you had the opportunity to teach 35 people, 35 seekers, would you take it? Would you do it? Would that be worth it to you? That's where Meetup comes in. That's where these strategies have come from. So for those who are getting started and how to get started, I want to tell you how our process began and what exactly we went about to get this thing going. The first thing, and this is by far one of the most trivial, I understand, but it really sets the tone, and that is to choose a name for your group. Ours is just simply called the Brownsburg Bible Study, as well as up with the Marian, or one of the Churches of Christ in Marian. I can't ever remember the name of that church. Simply calls there's the Marian Bible Study. There is one in Fishers. There is one in Atlanta, and all they do is they call them Location Bible Study. Here's the benefit of that. One, this is reaching out to your community, to those geographically near you. That's how Meetup works. It won't advertise a Meetup that's happening in Santee, California. You're not going to see that the Santee Church of Christ has a great Meetup going. It's only going to go within about 50 miles. So having it named for your community resonates well. And second, again, these are people who are typically unchurched. And even if they are churched in a way that if you just said Brownsburg Church of Christ, they would not show up. Again, everyone knows when your meeting times are. You can advertise that all you want. And hopefully that is getting visitors through the door. But we are reaching a different demographic with a Meetup. So just calling it something generic like Bible study is actually really valuable in reaching those unchurched people. So it begins to develop this strategy of reaching people who would not otherwise walk through your door. But beginning a Meetup is about so much more than choosing a name. It is also about building a team. So I want to talk to you for just a second about building a team. Because me, as an individual, I'm an evangelist. I love to teach people. I love to reach the unchurched. But I don't do this by myself, and I should not do this by myself. This is a great opportunity to get those in your congregations involved. And for me, I handpicked 3 people with which to begin this study who are going to come along with me, and I want to tell you about their roles and what I invited them, or why I invited them in particular. First, I want to tell you about Cindy Awad. She's the sweetheart. Cindy Awad is about the most open, loving person that I know. Within 3 minutes of meeting her, you will automatically know this woman cares about you and loves you dearly. That's the kind of person I want to bring along to this. Because one thing that I know about evangelism and one thing I know about teaching, I think this is a John Maxwell quote. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So bring along someone who's going to communicate that care, who's going to build those relationships. Because oftentimes when the interest in the Bible might start to wane, or that faith might start to waver, what they will latch onto is a relationship. Isn't that how church works? Isn't it the brothers and sisters in Christ that can uphold those things and start to encourage even when that faith gets too weak? Bring along a sweetheart. I also handpicked Cindy because I recognize that in this meetup, there might be women involved. And I at no point want to sit across the table from a woman, just me and the other woman. That is a terrible idea. So I brought one with me so that there's always at least 3 of us. And it also then, for those women who have come to this study, sets them at ease, that it's not just a whole bunch of men sitting around the table, because that's kind of daunting. So I brought with me Cindy Awad, the sweetheart. Next, I brought Ed Major. Ed Major is a straight talker. I know you do. I knew that was going to be a name that was going to be recognized in this group, but I love Ed. Ed, too, is a pretty sanguine guy. He's one who's pretty quick to build relationships, and so for that reason kind of compliments Cindy in that way. But here's one thing that you might know about Ed. Ed worked for Allison Transmission for a long time. He's now retired from them. But his job at Allison Transmission was a little unique. His job was to take Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and teach the employees. He did employee coaching. And so he was constantly bringing people along and saying, okay, here's where you're at, and here's where you need to be. I need that man with me. Because oftentimes in these Bible studies, I need someone who's going to call someone to action. Be like, all right, what are you going to do about this? And Ed is great for that. So Ed was an important part in building this team. Next, Jake Ward. Jake Ward, I'm calling the replacement, but I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I think that this meetup is a great opportunity to get people from your church involved. And I think that this is also a great grounds on which to teach someone how to be an evangelist and how to be a teacher. Jake Ward is a teacher professionally. He teaches at, what's that Christian school that's right off 200 and Girls School Road? Covenant, thank you. He teaches at Covenant. And he teaches English for him. Jake is a very natural teacher and a very warm person. He's kind of shy, but I think that he can be great in teaching lost souls. One of the reasons for that is because Jake he's willing and ready to think like an unchurched person. He doesn't just take everything lock, stock, and barrel. He's willing to ask questions. And it's the kind of questions that someone across the table is willing to ask as well. And so what I've been doing is I've been taking Jake and say, okay, you know how to be a teacher. Let me show you how to teach this. And when I came to him and said, Jake, I think you're the man for the job, he looked at me and he's like, okay. I mean, he was ready to do it, but he was terrified. Aren't there people in your church that way? That they could be great teachers. They could be the exact person that you need to start multiplying this work where disciples go make disciples, but they're terrified of doing it. And all they need is for someone to say to them, just come with me. Come with me and I will teach you how to do this. Come with me and I will show you what it means. He has been great. He's taught 2 different segments of this meetup group. One as a textual study in which he was sitting across the table every week from people who were churched but believed very differently theologically. They were Calvinists par excellence. And so Jake, with me sitting by him, led this study and he was contending for the faith. And honestly, that study, after a while, we looked at each other and said, this one, it's not going very far. He's like, I want to teach people who don't know the Bible, but want to. And so he has taught something that, go ahead and plug this away for later, the Bible for Absolute Beginners. I'll show you what that means later, but he has been a great teacher. So this is the kind of team that you need to develop. You need a sweetheart, a straight talker, and a replacement. And with all of those things, you can start to facilitate growing this group. Now, the reason that I limited it to this few in number is because imagine if you walked into a group. You've never been to a Bible study before. You've never been in a place that's going to call on you and say, okay, what do you think about this? And you're sitting in a group of 12 people who all go to the same church and think the exact same way. It's going to feel exactly like it would be in a church service in which there's a little bit of an outsider's feeling to it. But if there's a small number, even if we all have those things in common anyway, it's a little less daunting. So I would say, seed this study with no more than 3. That is 3 people plus the teacher. Seed it with no more than 4. Because that way, 1, you've got room at the table, and 2, it's less daunting. But in getting started, I also want to tell you about how to pick the best place to go. We have these studies not in our church building, again, because we're building a bridge between those in our community and those in our church. And so I wanted to find a place in the community that could facilitate this study. And here are some of the parameters that I used. First, that it needs to be able to seat 6 to 8 people comfortably. First parameter. Second, there needs to be minimal ambient noise. You need to be able to have a conversation. So that ruled out 2 places for me. The Jimmy John's in Brownsburg and Starbucks. There's a lot of preachers who have gone to Starbucks and have had great opportunities to reach out to people as they are there. But the one problem that I've had, and I've had Starbucks studies for years, is just how loud those coffee grinders are, how loud their music can get, the fact that there's always constant chatter around. It's deafening at times. And for Jimmy John's, their music is always just so loud there in Brownsburg that you can't talk to the person sitting next to you. You want minimal ambient noise. You also want it to be a place that's pretty inexpensive. You're asking people to come to a business, and you don't want just to come and loiter. You want to actually be able to make purchases. Again, this is benefiting a local business, but it is, but with that comes the opportunity to meet. And so you want it to be a place that's not going to break someone's bank. And finally, no servers. If you have a place that is a restaurant that has a server and you want to sit there for an hour to an hour and a half, what's that server going to be feeling? It is time for you to go. I need to turn this table because either you've got to tip me excessively or I need to be able to reach more customers. And it just creates this constant interruption as well. Someone's going to come to your table. Oh, do you guys have everything you need? Oh, do you have everything you need? And it's constantly distracting from that conversation that you're hoping to have. So with these parameters, I went to the place that I never expected to go. McDonald's. And the reason I never expected to go to McDonald's is because I have seen Super Size Me. And I hate just how unhealthy that place is. Yet, what I found is it can reasonably fit 6 to 8 people comfortably. It is minimal ambient noise. It is inexpensive, and there are no servers. Let me tell you about what I have experienced in going to McDonald's anywhere between 2 and 4 times a week for these meetup studies. I walk in the door and they know me by name. I walk in the door and we have a conversation in which sometimes it is about the Bible, and sometimes it is this. They walk up and I'm just ordering a drink, and they look at me and they say, Josh, I've got something going on in my life right now. I want you to pray for me. If someone in the community came to you and said that, wouldn't you be overjoyed? That's what we've been able to experience. They have never been rude. They have never driven us away. The only time it got awkward is when one of their employees quit and came to our Bible study. that day. Like walked off the job, didn't even exit the building and came to our table. That got a little weird. But even then I went to the manager and I was like, we didn't tell her to quit. Like we didn't encourage this. Like we're happy that she sat at our Bible study, but we're not aiming for this. And the manager looked at me and said, Josh, you're here all the time. Like we get you guys. And we're glad that you guys are here. And we know that she's got her own problems. And we went, Only time it's ever gotten awkward. So picking the right place is also pretty important. Picking the right place is also pretty important, an important part of getting this thing started. Sure. What's up? Nope. Most businesses are pretty happy to find people coming through the doors and ordering food or whatever it is. And so we didn't start that way, but we just kind of developed a rapport with them, and I don't think it's all that necessary. Yes, not quite yet. Because that gets into our basic strategies about how to make this work. I'm going to talk to you about what to study. I'm going to talk to you about principles for improving your attendance, for which time of day is important, and a few other things about how we made this work. Between any Bible study, I think that there are two basic types. Textual is one. Can you guess what the other one is? Topical. There you go. And between the two, textual and topical, I believe that both are good, but are going to draw very different things from a meetup group. Most meetup groups begin with a textual study. All they do is say, we're going to open our Bibles and read and have a discussion about it. And there is a beauty to that. I would advise, if you're going to begin with a textual study, to begin with one of the Gospels. Reason, if you start with, say, the book of Acts, and you say, we're reading the book of Acts. The book of Acts is really valuable. It shows a lot about conversions. Like there's a lot of really good things for teaching unchurched in the book of Acts. But what if you had no idea what the book of Acts was? The only people that you're going to come are people, or the only people that are going to come to that are people who already know what the book of Acts is. I.e., they're going to be churched in some way, and they're not really seeking. So I would begin with a textual study about Jesus and have that mentality. We're just going to read through and we're going to talk about this. But don't advertise it as the book of John or the book of Matthew. Take from... How well do you guys know John chapter 1? Pretty well? I imagine you would. If you were going to create something from John chapter 1 that ties it all together and an unchurched person might understand and gravitate toward, what would you title it? How would you summarize John chapter 1? The Word became flesh, which is straight from the text. But if you're unchurched, what does that mean to you? Maybe something. Put that in, take that concept, Word became flesh, and imagine you have never opened your Bible before. What does that mean? It means a divine God walking on 2 feet. When God became man. That's something a seeker could understand. When God became man. You're not advertising John 1, but you are studying John 1, in which it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. And then later on, and he tabernacled among us. The Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. You can talk about God becoming man and just what a valuable thing that is. People think that they know who Jesus is, but oftentimes they only know what they've been told about Jesus. So beginning with one of the Gospels is a great textual study with which to begin. But topical studies. There is a group beginning in Westfield with Emerson Brown, and he's working really hard right now to develop a meetup that covers current issues and apologetics, teaching people to ask questions and giving Christian answers. It's a great topical study. Another one that I'll tell you about again in a little bit, I do something called the Bible for Absolute Beginners. I told you about it once, I'll tell you about it later on. But it is technically a topical study in which I'm going through the Bible and showing someone who's never studied before what is in the Bible and how they can be comfortable with it. But for the basic strategies, I want to talk to you also about a couple principles in growing your audience. There are some who have started a meetup and they come every week and they sit down in the same place and they start to study the same things and they only ever have their church members show up. It's pretty defeating. But here are a few things that we have found about growing your attendance. First, advertise via Facebook. I don't know about here or in your communities in general, but we have something in Brownsburg called Brownsburg Chatter. It is a wonderful, terrible thing. It is the place for all kinds of local gossip. It is a place for bad restaurant reviews. It is a place to talk politics. It is basically just a community forum. Here's why that's a good thing. Almost everyone in Brownsburg is part of the Brownsburg Chatter group. So you can go on there and say, hey, we've got a Bible study. You should come. Or better yet, and this is when our meetup really started to take off, one of those who had attended our studies went to Brownsburg Chatter and said, I've been attending this study. It's been great. You should come too. That kind of review, posted in a public way, multiplied our efforts and got people through the door that wouldn't have otherwise been. It's pretty great. Next, through Meetup, people can become members of your page. You can frame that in different ways. You can call them seekers or disciples, whatever. People change the names for it. But people can become members, but when they do so, contact each new member individually. I'll tell you about a guy named Bruce. Bruce became a member of our group. He was looking to study the Bible more, but he didn't know really where to find it. And he found our meetup group. But he found several Bible study theological meetup groups. But I sent him a message through the app and said, hey, Bruce, my name's Josh, and I organize the Brownsburg meetup group, or the Brownsburg Bible study meetup group. Here's what we do, and here's who we are, and we'd love for you to join us. He came to the meetup and said, I probably wouldn't have actually shown up if you hadn't messaged me. This is about creating a personal connection. And one way to do that is to do so on an individual way. Third, the time question. I don't initially, because again, this is for the unchurched and for people who might see the name of a church and kind of run away. And so for that, I say, this is who our group is. And here's something about us. We'd love to have you join us. Again, keep that door open. And then when they show up, they're going to ask you, where do you go to church? And you should tell them, absolutely. But I don't do that in the initial meeting or in the initial message. Yes, sir. Yes, they become a member of your group through the app and through the. So currently, with our meetup group, here's our little page. There are 87 members of this Bible study. Have 87 people showed up? No. I'd love it if they did. But we've had a higher retention rate in as much as the group up in Marion. They called me recently and said, hey, Josh, we've got 101 people who have expressed interest in our group, who have become members. So they get notifications every time we have a Bible study, but they don't show up. How do we get people to show up? And I told them, contact them individually when they become members. So ours sounds something like this. Hey, Bruce, thank you for being my name is Joshua Weber. I host the Brownsburg Bible Study. Thank you for becoming our newest member. Let me tell you a little bit about our group. Our group is a pretty diverse group. We have everything from theologians to absolute beginners who know nothing about the Bible. But we sit around a table as people who care about each other and care about the Word and wanting to grow in it. Here's the times that we meet, and here's what we're studying. Which one is best for you? End with the ask. End with the ask to say, all right, when are you coming? When can we see you? And that can generate people to say, all right, this is the time that works best for me. But again, concerning the timing, you asked me earlier, be flexible about time and place. When we started, we tried to pick a time that was available for most people. What would you say would be a time that most people are available during the week? Any guess is fine. Day and time. Yeah, 7 o'clock in the evening, I presume. All right, what day of the week? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, he's thinking the right way. Might deter people from being available on that night, whether it's actual work and responsibilities availability or if it's just interest availability. We're competing for people's time. So we started at 7 o'clock on Thursday. Thursday was our day because I have a Bible study that meets at my house on Tuesdays every week. So I'm like, well, Tuesday's not available, and I don't want to do Mondays, football. I don't want to do Wednesdays, we've got church. I don't want to do Fridays because people are usually just wanting to do something social. So we went with Thursday. We started with the book of Philippians. I love the book of Philippians because it shows you how to think through various situations. So chapter 1 is think positive, even when in a negative situation. Chapter 2 is think humbly. Chapter 3 is think with an eternal focus. And chapter 4 is think peace and think generosity. I was like, okay, I can advertise that to a non-Christian. They don't have to know anything about the Bible, but they can come and learn how to think positively in a negative situation. Let's do it. Thursday nights, 7 o'clock. Guess how many people showed up? Nobody showed up. I was thinking this is the time. This is when it needs to be. If no one's going to show up at this time, no one's going to show up, period. But then, point number 2, I started messaging people and said, hey, I know that you've expressed interest in this group. And we recognize that maybe Thursday at 7 o'clock might not work for you. We're thinking about creating a new time. What time works for you? I got the answer that I never expected from at least 3 people. How about Monday afternoons? Somewhere between like 2 and 5. Okay, so we met on Monday afternoon at 2:30. And you might wonder, who on earth is going to show up on Monday afternoon at 2:30? The people who said they were going to. That's who showed up. Be flexible. And always keeping that option of, hey, we can create a new time, means that every person who's expressing true interest and saying, hey, I want to be at a Bible study, but your times don't work for me, wouldn't you be willing to go out of your way to say, hey, yeah, I'll meet with you whenever you want to? be flexible with your time because you never know when it's going to be available for people. And it also showed me you never know what God is going to do with this. I had a plan. I was like, all right, I got this all figured out. Let's go. And then I went to those first 3 in which no one came. And I thought, man, maybe this isn't going to work here. Maybe it worked in Atlanta. Maybe it worked in San Diego. Maybe it's just not going to work here. And then God stripped away my plan and said, no, go at this time. Go teach this person. I felt like I was going, running, and jumping in a chariot to someone who is willing to say, I have no idea what this means. That gets me to the next point. I started this meetup group, and in that particular study, when we started on Monday afternoon at 2:30, I started reading through Mark. We were just going to read a chapter and talk about it. Mark is kind of a fast-paced gospel, and it's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of, there's some theological depth to it, but it's not, there's a lot of surface material with which someone can get introduced to Jesus. So that's what I did. Yet as we're reading through it, there are some people in this Bible study, again, seed members of our church, who they're treating this like any normal adult Bible study, like we'd have in class, or like we'd have at church. And they start asking me questions like in Mark chapter 2, in which Jesus is violating the Sabbath. They start asking questions about the Sabbath. And we go on this long discursus about trying to figure out what the Bible has to say about the Sabbath. I remember after that study, Sherry Bowes, who had come and was terrified, walked away, and she told us after that study, Josh, I don't think I can come back. What? My heart sunk. And I said, why? She said, I don't think I know enough to keep up. I was asking them to turn to places like Deuteronomy chapter 5, and she went, where? She had no idea. And she said, I don't think I can come back. I said, hold on, Sherry. Why don't you and I meet? Smaller group, you and I will meet, and I'll start walking you through the Bible as if for an absolute beginner. And she said, that sounds good. So we met, and I sat across the table from her with a note card and a pen. And I started teaching her sections of the Bible on a note card. She got done with that first study. She looked up, her eyes started watering, and she looked at me and said, Josh, why has it taken me so long in my life to finally understand this book? That is the same response I have gotten over and over and over again. So here's what I do with this. I have the Bible subdivided into 13 different studies. I didn't aim for that. I wasn't aiming for a quarter system, but it happened that way. First study is on Genesis. The second is on Exodus and the rest of the law. So Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The next one is on the beginning of the kingdom, or Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and a little bit of 1 Samuel. Then we talk about King David. We talk about 1st and 2nd Samuel. Then we talk about the divided kingdom, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and the ending of that kingdom. Then we talk about the exile and return. So Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, and Daniel is in that one. And then we talk about how to read the books of poetry. So that's Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Then we talk about how to read the prophets. Then we talk about the biographies of Jesus. Which 4 books do you think are included in that one? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I do one on the book of Acts, one on the letters of Paul, one on the other letters in the New Testament, and then one on the book of Revelation. And in each one of them, I'm drawing on a note card, here's what's in that book, or here's what's in those books. And then I do, as the final one, and a call to action, just in case they need one, I do the big picture of the Bible by Ken Craig, also drawn on a note card. We're going through this pretty fast. I'll give you guys a choice. Would you guys like to see one of these? What I'm doing to teach a Bible for absolute beginner, so that you can see what I'm doing on a note card and what's been so powerful in our meetup groups. Would you guys like to see it? Absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, they're all pretty different. Some of them will repeat. So sometimes I'll have multiple Bible for absolute beginners going on, which is actually kind of beneficial because if someone misses one, they can just come to the next one. Or we'll have multiple textual studies going on. Like I told you, I also wanted Jake to start doing this. And so sometimes we'll have multiple teachers happening at the same time. Right now, it's kind of pared down. We're experiencing a little bit of a low season. So right now we only have 2. Right now we have we have 3. We have one on Monday afternoon that has continued faithfully. We have one on Monday evening, and then we have one on Saturday mornings, which is our Bible for absolute beginners, which is actually what this is. It's the advertisement that we put around town and on Facebook. It's just simple design and says, here's what we're doing. All under Brownsburg Bible Study, right? If you want to pay twice for it, one of the things I should have told you, and because I was asked a question about this at the beginning, was Meetup will give you maybe a free trial, but after that, it does require payment. And so for us, we've bracketed all of this under one umbrella, and we just have multiple events per week, and we'll advertise them differently. Bible for Absolute Beginners, Genesis, or we'll say Mark or John 1, God becomes man. Something like that. Like that's how we'll advertise it. And so each of them will have something different. Right now, we've gone through a lot with our Monday afternoon study. And so right now we're actually studying the book of Acts. And I advertise it the gospel on trial. And reason for that is because most of the time throughout the book of Acts, the apostles are on trial. But it's not just the apostles that are on trial. It is the gospel that they preach. And we, as readers, become part of the jury. And we need to make a verdict. Is this gospel true or not? And so that's how we advertise it, is the gospel on trial. And anyway, and then our Monday night, we just finished, we've got one more in the book of Philippians, chapter 4. We're going to talk about the generosity that the Philippians had at the end of the book. After that, I'm not sure what each of those studies are. Anyway, so I'll advertise them in those ways. I think it is somewhere around $90 every 6 months. Pretty reasonable, I think, and by far worth it. Because if that means that I get to talk to 35 people that otherwise I wouldn't have got a chance to talk to, $90, easy, done. Because I'd rather have that opportunity. So that's the cost that I didn't tell you about. The bridge to church attendance is probably somewhere around, I'd say 30%, and bridge to conversion somewhere around 5 to 10. But again, that's great. Exactly. Go ahead. Yeah. You are thinking exactly right. Yes. Here, let me tell you that the Sherry Bowes, who came to that and said, I don't know enough to keep up. I came the next time and I bought multiple copies of the exact same ESV. That's what I use. And I said, here's one for you. You take it. She goes, really? Yes. And I'm going to keep one too. So that way, when I say turn to Ezekiel 17, I can say, turn to page 673. Oh, that would be so much easier. 80% of the people who walk into my meetup are carrying a copy, that particular copy of an ESV, because they need it. Because they need to be able to follow along and say, here's the page number. Now, in each of my Bible for Absolute Beginners series, I tell them, I walk them through the table of contents on a regular basis because I want them to learn where these books of the Bible are. I don't want them to depend on, here's what the page number is. But initially, if they are asking a question and I need to be able to take them to a passage, I do it by saying, here's your page number. And they love that. Now, some, usually, if they want to use their own Bible, it's because they're already familiar with it. And they don't have to struggle to find it. There's only been one exception to that rule. There was a man who came to our Bible study, and his father bequeathed him his Bible, but sadly didn't teach him anything about it. And so he carries this Bible and doesn't know how to get around it, but it's very sentimental to him. And so for him, we say either we've turned a lot to the book of Proverbs. How would you tell someone to find the book of Proverbs? You can go to their table of contents or open halfway through your Bible and go just to the right. If you're halfway through your Bible, you're going to hit about Psalms. Go just to your right. And we could do things like that. And he now will repeat back to me if we're turning to Proverbs. Halfway through your Bible, just to the right. So he's learning to find them on his own, but that's been the only exception. We, by the way, as a church there at Brownsburg, have bought 100 copies of that exact same Bible, and we now keep them in our pews because we're trying to make our church available for seekers also, who might here turn to Ezekiel chapter 36 and go, I have no idea where that is. So if you need a little bit of help, there's a People Bible in front of you, and it's on page number 673 or whatever it is. Yes, sir. Members or involvement? Sizable members, I would say it was about, we're only now at 87. I don't even count that huge or whatever it was. But how long did it take for those members to develop enough to have a good Bible study and for the people to be coming? A month. It is what brings them to that. Part of it's the social media advertising, and the other one of our meetups, our Monday evening meetup, is purely from people who came to our study and wanted to go tell their family and friends. It is natural, organic evangelism that can happen once you get this bulb. Right, and that's where the social media advertising comes in. I took this picture and I put it on our Brownsburg chatter. Said, hey, come on. Again, one of the people who attended our group said, this guy's name is Josh, and I've been attending his Bible study, and you know what? I'm finally getting it. You should come too. How many people showed up after that? Again, it happened on Facebook, which is a different social media platform, but it's a far more frequented one. And so you use the juggernaut to advertise for the smaller. You know, we have hit an interesting demographic. For that 2:30 in the afternoon, most of the people who showed up were like 50 or above. Again, not something I anticipated from social media. Now, there have been people ranging all the way down to currently Emmanuel comes, and he is, oh, no, they've been younger than Emmanuel. There was one young man who came with his mom, and he was still in high school. And he wanted to come and drag his mom along. That was kind of cool. And so they have ranged from 16 all the way up to the oldest, probably 63 is probably our oldest one. Anyway, so in the general sense, we've hit kind of a 40 to 60 demographic, but it's hit all ages. My house at 2 o'clock or at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. But that's just because we say, hey, college, high school kids, come to our house. Ralph Walker, I was having lunch with him just on Friday, and he has an interesting acronym for them. Young adults and college, YACS. Anyway, I just say, hey, show up at our house. And the interesting thing is, one, our high school and college kids come, and then they invite their friends. And it's even been, some people have reached out and said, hey, I'm a young person, I'm looking for a young person's Bible study. Last one to do that, her name was Summer, and she comes to our house every week. She's not a member of the church, but she comes every week. That's been our kids will come if you feed them pizza. Just saying, it works. But that hasn't happened through Meetup. Have we run out of questions? That's what originality is, right? Uh-huh. It's perfect. I think that idea is fantastic. For handouts, again, usually the handouts that I have are hand-drawn note cards. But if you were to want to develop a curriculum for this and you had sheets that you walked into a study, I would say come into the study with as many as you might need. And second, don't let the curriculum feel like if anyone's coming in for the first time that they missed something. That's the only problem with handouts. We are studying Acts right now, I told you, on Monday afternoons. And this group is pretty well defined. Like, there are some more people who come, but it's pretty much the 7 of us that come on Monday afternoons. And when they said, hey, we'd like to study Acts, I had just finished writing a book on it, a workbook on it. So I gave each of them a copy. Yet, we're going through it at a much slower pace. And so actually we ended up ditching those because what I had written to be accomplished in 13 weeks, we have studied probably for 7 or 8 weeks, and we're now in chapter 8. Like, so we ditched the handouts because they just weren't helpful. And I would say that the negative drawback to handouts could be, well, what have I not got? Or which of these did I not get? But I love the idea of how to study the Bible. That is fantastic. And any means that you need to do that, yes, please do. Go ahead. No, I don't do that very much. The only person with whom I do that at any regularity is Andy Cantrell, and that's because he's a mentor to me and a friend. But I'm the student in that one, so, and he lives in Minnesota, so that's the only reason I do that. But no, my goal for this is not to reach people that I couldn't drive to go see, because I want them also to be able to come to our church. Now, my goal in evangelism is not to grow church attendance. I don't feel like that can be or should be my goal. I want them to become Christians. I want them to love God. And as disciples, I know that they need to be plugged into a church, but that means that church attendance is secondary rather than primary. Now, oftentimes they'll come to the church before becoming a Christian, but oftentimes they'll become a Christian before coming to our church. So that's my philosophy on that, if you You could title it that simply, How to Study the Bible, because you want it to be clear and you want people to understand. You want to understand what they're getting into. But if you wanted anything more catchy than that, I don't know. I kind of liked Jason Hardin's title for the book that he produced through DeWard Publishing Company. It had Meetup's original logo had one of those name tags signs on it. And his just had the name tag that says, "Hello, I'm your Bible." Just, it became a sense of like, oh, I'm getting to know you, and I really don't know you. Anything like that is kind of a cool concept. You get 6 months of availability to host and advertise your events. And so for that, see, Facebook is good, but because Meetup is implicitly about events to which you're going to show up, it is more natural to that call to action. Yeah, that's the average range that it would advertise. It's something Meetup sets, and you can even narrow your search to less. And so I get advertisements for the Marian Bible study, but I'm not going to drive all the way up there typically. I love those guys, but I've never driven up there because of the parameters that are set within 50 miles. Again, meetup sets I can change, but I haven't ever changed it. And so it will prompt you, say, it will ask you as you begin even just a profile, what kind of things are you interested in? You can type out Bible study, Christian, Jesus, whatever. You can type all those in, and it will generate and say, okay, here are some things that we think you might enjoy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No. It's free for everyone unless they're hosting. Um, so if you're going to host, that's when you have to pay. But just to be a member of Meetup costs absolutely nothing. Initially set a time. So ours was Thursday at 7:00. And then if people are joining your page, but they're not coming at that time, again, contact them individually and say, hey, what time works for you? So find whatever time you think is going to work, but just be flexible with it. You already have one to start. Exactly. Go ahead, Art. There is a messaging center within the app. There's a messaging portion of the app. Mm-hmm. Yes. But through this app, you have permission to contact them. Exactly. Great. And you don't have to reprint every time you start a new one. Yeah. That's a great idea, and one that I intended to begin. Now, our meetup is undergoing a little bit of a revision, but only because they now know that I'm moving. But going down to Florida, which is where I'll be moving, um, I'm going to be starting this all over again. And that business card idea is one that I had that I really hope to print and start because it's fantastic. Give those to, you can just carry those around and leave them with your server or just leave them in public places. Like that'd be a fantastic idea. Or give them to your members and say, hey, go. Go ahead. What? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've never asked them to do that, but you totally could. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Great idea. If it's, I have found it is far more effective for members of the study to advertise it than the organizer. Because the organizer, there is some level, I think subconsciously, of, oh, this person's just wanting to boost something that they're starting, which is, I don't fault people for having that kind of apprehension. But if it's coming from someone in the study saying, hey, I just really enjoyed myself, this is what we studied and this who taught it, people are far more likely to show up. So asking your members to do that, yeah, that's a great idea. Oh, heavens, no. Can I give you guys one more just thing that's been helpful to me? Turn your Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 14. And this is something that I don't just tell my meetup, I tell people at my church as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, it says, in verse 22, it says, thus tongues are a sign for believers, but for unbelievers, while prophecy is a sign for unbelievers, or not for unbelievers, but for believers. If therefore the whole church comes together and all speak in tongues, and the outsiders or unbelievers enter, will they not say that you are out of your minds? Love that passage. He continues to say, but if all prophecy and an unbeliever or outsider enters, he is convicted by all, and he is called to account by all. The secret of his heart, or the secrets of his heart, are disclosed, and so falling on his face, he will worship God and declare that God is really among you. We don't speak in tongues. We don't even prophesy specifically, but I believe that this passage is talking, or can be applied to talk about the things that an outsider can understand and something that just sounds like church speak. If you talk in church speak, people will walk in and they will just simply say, you are out of your minds. But if they understand, their heart can be called into conviction, the secrets of their heart can be disclosed, and they will fall on their face among you and say, God is truly among you. For that, what I encourage in churches is, you know, all those phrases that just fill our prayers? Don't say those. No one understands them. No one who's seeking understands them. And for our meetups, what I tell them is, don't just bring church here. Think like an outsider. Think like an unbeliever. And talk in a way that they're going to get it. And if that means simplifying with a synonym, do it. Exactly. Tyler was having a study. Now, he wasn't having a meetup study, but he was having a study with a brand new Christian. And they were studying through the Gospel of Luke together. And he said it was weeks before this girl in their study finally had the courage to ask, what is a Gentile? Even if you have to use a synonym. They can either say you are out of your minds, and I think that people walking into our church buildings are more than ready to say that. And I think that people walking into a Bible study for the first time are willing to say it too. But I'm aiming for the latter. I get it. So why did that question come up? Like, how is that relevant? Yeah, that's not the goal. Okay, I get that now. So this was at church, and it's on how to teach seekers and unbelievers. Okay. Then for that class, that's an appropriate time to ask that question, but that also might not be the class that a seeker might need. And so you're right, you need to equip your members, but that's the place to do it usually, is in the church, or I do it individually. I do it with each of the members of our meetup group. I have conversations with just them, say, hey, this is what's going on. I think this is what this person needs. Hey, sometimes let's not bring this up, or sometimes let's bring this up. Ed's really great about that. He's like, all right, so when are we going to talk about this? And I think he's really good for that. I'm really thankful for it. But here's my kind of long-term strategy. I play, if you will, a little bit of a long game when it comes to evangelism. I don't sit down with someone and think I'm only going to have one chance with this person. Unless I know I'm only going to have one chance with this person. Like, I'll talk to people on the planes, and often as I'm riding on a plane, and I might know in that moment that's going to be the only time that I get. But as far as meeting people in the community, I don't talk to them as if this is the one chance I have to tell you everything. It creates this sense of anxiety and urgency that is not really necessary. So here's my long-term goal. I want people to first become comfortable with the Bible. I want them to see it as authoritative. I want them to become a Christian. And then I want them to be members of our church. In that order. Now, the reason why I say that is because I don't skirt issues. I don't steer away from them. But I only go to issues as the text brings them up. My topical studies are topical studies like the Bible for Absolute Beginners, or I think that up in Westfield they're doing a great thing in saying, okay, what about current topics and thinking through them as Christians? At least then people know, all right, I'm walking into a big question. Here's the question I'm coming to talk about. They're prepared for that. But when we were studying through Mark, and we got to the point in which Jesus starts teaching about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And there are people at this table who are married and divorced and remarried, but not in a biblical way. And so at that point, I've got a choice. I either skirt the issue because I know it's going to be uncomfortable for them, or I have the conversation that they actually need to have. I choose to have the conversation. But it's never coming from me. That's why getting them comfortable with the Bible and seeing it as authoritative, that's already been established by the time we get to Mark chapter 12. They've already been through this process where they're seeing, okay, this is how I study. This is who Jesus is. Oh, this is the fact that the Bible is teaching me. And then all of a sudden you get to this part about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Say, here's what the text says. But I only bring it up as the text brings it up, because that means it's not coming from me attacking them. It's the Bible teaching and convicting. So that's my strategy on that. Well, it is 11:25, and thanks for the study, guys. One more thing concerning the timing. I keep it to an hour. I advertise it. It's going to be an hour, and I keep it to that hour because I don't want to take up people's time. I'm not going to do that to you guys today. It's been an hour and 15 minutes. Sometimes it goes a little long because people have extra questions, or we love each other and want to talk sometimes. Sometimes it goes a little bit long, but I keep the study to an hour or less. And I would advise you guys do the same. That's it. You guys want to pray?